People, processes, systems. They're the three cornerstones of an organization's operating model of how an organization does business, how they work. And many people refer to those as people, processes, and technology, but I prefer to refer to systems, and I'll explain that later in the video. More importantly, I think those three cornerstones are also the key cornerstones of project management. And while most people lean towards methodologies as their first port of call of how to deliver a project successfully, I think you can take a different approach. And if you watch the rest of this video, I'll explain why they're important and explain in detail where I think people miss the importance of those 3 points. Welcome to The Pragmatic Professional. My name's Ian, and for the last 20 years I've been delivering organisational and technology change within the financial services industry. I've recently taken some time out to write my book, The Project Management Mindset, which is aimed at project managers and aimed at teaching them the skills and behaviours that they need to develop, the competencies they need to develop, past the methodologies in order to be a highly effective project manager. So if you're new to the profession or looking to learn a bit more, these videos will walk through each chapter of my book one by one to explain in summary the details of those chapters. If you'd like to buy my book, it's available on Amazon and other retailers. I'll put a link in the comments below. And if you'd like to see the rest of these videos, please hit the subscription button and you'll be notified when I release them. I'm aiming to do about one every 3 weeks until I get through the remaining chapters. This is video 4 of the series, where we're going to talk about people, processes, and systems. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the term operating model, think of it as a simple definition, a diagram of how an organization operates, how it does what it does. Whereas a business model defines how an organization makes money, adds value to its customers, an operating model defines how it does that. And this is usually defined in 3 simple layers: the people that an organization has, the processes they use, and the technology, or as I prefer, the systems that it uses to support those. Now, my book, The Project Management Mindset, is based around 2 core principles. The first of those, which we'll cover in this video, is that people are more important than processes. And that's derived from a philosophy that I've been using for many, many years, which isn't particularly original, but I do think a lot of people miss the point. And that's what I call the Heirarchy of Operational Excellence. And that's really a definition that states that in order for an organisation to achieve optimal operational performance, it needs to solve 3 things in a particular order. It needs to have people, and it needs to have processes, and it needs to have systems. But in particular, it's people, then processes, then systems. And the reason I call it a hierarchy is the impact of having each of those areas solved has cumulative benefits. And that's to state that there are limited benefits in having great processes if you don't have great people. And there are limited benefits in having great systems if they're not based around great processes and great people. Or conversely, you can have the best systems and the best processes in the world, but they're going to have very, very limited impact if you don't have great people. And while this might seem like really basic fundamental stuff, it is. But I've been surprised over the last 20 years of my career how many people say these things but don't really and can't articulate actually the benefits of having those 3 things in place. So I think it's really, really important as you begin a career in project management and start looking to transform or make changes to organisations that you really understand the benefits. And more importantly, it refers specifically and particularly towards projects as well, which I'll come on to later. So let's run through those 3 very simply and highlight why they're important. So the first one is obvious: people. People do the work that adds value to an organisation and to the customer. Quite simply, without people, you can't do the work. Processes help the people do the work better. They offer consistency, standardization, and efficiency. Now, systems are a little bit trickier, but simply, systems connect people and processes together. So they help people in multiple locations working in different jobs using different processes to string their processes together for the wider organizational benefit. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the video, I don't use the term technology, and there's a reason for that. And that's because technology has a dual role. So technology can be used as a tool for an individual to help them do their job better, faster, simpler. And technology can also be used as part of a system to help enforce processes and to link processes together. And that's where I think systems are more important as a definition. So systems do not need to be technology. Systems help different people work with different processes and link them together. So it can be as simple as a waiter in a restaurant taking an order on a notepad, taking that notepad down, working in a process in isolation, taking that to the kitchen and pinning that to a board for a chef to then read that, take that information, take that clarification and make that order, to then join up back with the waiter again to take that food back. In theory, that's a very simple system. It's using paper as a tool and it's using a pin board and that connection as a system. It doesn't need to involve any technology, and as time's evolved, that has started to use technology. People take orders on iPads, people take on mobile devices that go straight through to a queuing system in a kitchen, but it doesn't need to be technology. And the additional benefit of systems is they help capture information for future learning and future improvement. So as people are working through their processes, they can capture information on customers, on the process, to help trigger other processes and learn for the future. So let's go through each one in a bit more detail, and we'll start with people. And while this might seem a very obvious one, and lots of organisations say people first, I question sometimes whether people really understand why and what the benefits are, because it sounds like a very nice thing to do, but actually for an organisation, it makes a lot of sense. So what does it mean to solve people? Now, I think a lot of organisations say that they're people first, or they really value their people, but I question sometimes whether people are consciously thinking about what that means. And for me, it's quite simple. It means having the right number of people, in the right locations, with the right skills, with the right behaviours, with the right motivation, all aligned to a single vision and pulling in the same direction, and using the right tools for their job. And the reason I put that first in the hierarchy is if you tick all of those attributes and have great people in the right numbers with the right skills and the right tools, the right motivation, it would be very, very difficult to not get great results with that workforce. However, getting those results might be more painful, or at least less efficient than it could be. And that's really where processes come in. Now, the easiest way I think to visualize this is to think about starting a small business yourself. If you did, I imagine it'd be likely that most people would start by reaching out to a small set of skilled experts that they knew within an industry to come together and produce whatever products it was you were producing to serve your customers' needs. And while the business was operating well within that small group of experts, it's very unlikely that you would need more than just your skills and expertise to manage that business. But now think about if that business starts to grow and you cannot manage the demand, you start to need to bring on more people. Now, as you bring on more people, those people are less likely to be quite as skilled and have the expertise or the motivation or the tools maybe that your original experts did. And that's where you start to get variation in performance. Your small group of experts that you can trust and rely on suddenly becomes a wider group of people that aren't quite as skilled, hopefully have the right motivation, but you might need to help standardize that outcome. You might start to get a lot more variance in the outcome that you're producing. Simply put, you would go from a small team of A players to a wider team that's made up of a mix of A and B players. And those B players won't produce as good results as your A players. And the challenge is how do you bring your B players up to the same level as your A players? And that's where processes come in. In really simple terms, processes are a series of predefined steps that you follow to perform a specific task. And processes have a few really, really important benefits. First, they help with consistency. So they help to try to make sure that everyone doing the same task does it in the same way, following the same steps. And that, by definition, increases the chance of getting the same outcome. So in the case of our A and B players, it helps your B players replicate the steps that your A players go through. Secondly, they improve efficiency. So by defining the steps that people go through to perform a specific task, you can analyze and remove unnecessary steps, meaning that people aren't performing steps in a task that aren't beneficial to either them, the customer, or the organization. They mean they're doing only what needs to be done to perform that task well. And thirdly, linked to the first point, they make learning new tasks easier. So if you have well-documented processes and you need to bring new people without specific skills into the business, it helps them perform those tasks more closely to the people who are really good at those tasks without having to try and remember and memorize all of the steps required in a short period of time. Effectively, it helps onboarding and with that speed to competency, because now someone who doesn't know a job has a few defined steps that they can follow, which means learning that role and getting good at those steps becomes a lot easier. So if you think again about our A and B player example, the A players can define how a task should be performed. The B players coming in, even a C player, someone who's brand new to the business, can look through that before they've even done the job and understand and have a document that takes them through all the steps they need to do and what's specifically critical within each step to do it well. However, processes have limitations, and that is they can't teach people the soft skills and behaviours that they need to do the job well. They can't necessarily turn an introvert into an extrovert. They can't teach someone how to relate to a customer or how to empathise in a conversation. Those are natural behaviours that are either inherent or learnt over time and experience that processes simply can't instill by having that process documented. What they also can't do is solve or overcome the essential attributes of your people. They can't help with the motivation of people. They can't help align them to the vision. They can't necessarily give them all the skills they need. And the way I like to put this to people when thinking about processes above people is you cannot solve a people problem with a process. And the last limitation of processes is it's very, very difficult to enforce people to follow them unless they absolutely have to. So you might have a very well documented process, you might have the right people, but they don't necessarily have to follow those processes and might, under pressure, not follow those processes clearly. And that's where systems come in. And the way I like to think about systems is as an amplification layer above your people and processes, a multiplier that connects your people, processes together across multiple people, multiple locations, and helps amplify the benefits of each of those individually into a wider system. So to go into a bit more detail, I think they have a few really key benefits. The first of those, as we've touched on, is they help people adhere to the processes defined. So if you can build into a system a process, whether it's a technology piece where someone has to log into a system and follow the steps, think of a very simple form on a website, that helps people adhere to the process, because to progress to the next stage on that system, they have to enter the right data, click the right buttons in order to progress. There's no other way for them to do it. So it really, really helps people stick to the processes that are defined. And the second key benefit we've already touched on is that they help link processes together and the people using them. So if you think about this in really simple terms of an online retailer, you can have a website taking an order with a user entering detail. You can have a customer fulfillment team taking those details and processing them into some kind of database that can automatically, once it's completed, fire off to a fulfillment team in a warehouse to stock that client's order. That once they've completed their process through the system, they can then have that shipped to a delivery company. Those are all individual processes that can all be linked together through one system. That is quite simple and quite relevant, but that is the real benefit of having an interlinked system linking individual people performing a specific role, following a process to be really good at that role, but also being able to put that role and that process into a wider interlinked system that forms the basis of an organisation's operation. And the third key benefit of systems is they help your organisation learn. So again, as those people are working through those processes on systems, they can capture information that can then later be analysed and look for areas of improvement. You know, in very simple terms, marketing information, you can look at what your customers are buying, look at what the trends are, look at what they're searching for that you're currently not meeting their needs. You can look at how fast processes are working. You can look at who's performing better than other people and look to close those gaps. The information captured by using those systems is ultimately significantly beneficial to the wider organisation over time. And that's where the hierarchy of operational excellence helps an organisation achieve optimal operational performance. You have really great people working through really good processes, working on a really great system. And if you can achieve all three of those, you're likely to achieve fantastic results in the short and the long term. However, it's the cumulative benefits that need to be focused on. Many organisations I've worked with are really keen to focus on technology because they feel like that's where the benefits are. In the modern era, a lot of our work is technology based and they forget what a system is meant to be. And the key thing that I mentioned earlier is that technology has a dual use. And there are a few examples of this. The technology can be used as a tool for an individual user to do their job really well, or it can be used as part of a system to help connect multiple people and processes together. So if you think about this in really simple terms, the example I give in my book, I think, is of a satellite navigation. So a simple satellite navigation unit for an individual user is used as a tool. It helps them when they're on a journey, plot a path, the most efficient path from one place to another. That piece of technology is being used by that user to make their journey, make their job easier. However, when you look at modern satellite navigation on things like Google Maps, that piece of technology is then also linked to multiple users. All of that data is connected and pooled in one place and fed back in real time. So now that piece of technology as part of a system has a wider use. It helps that central organization, Google or wherever it might be, collate live information and learn as it goes. And it also allows that data to be fed back for rerouting or avoiding traffic to those individual users. So the same piece of technology can be used either in one instance as a tool or in a wider instance as part of a system, and has benefits in both instances but very different uses. And the other angle to think about that I've tried to highlight as I've been talking through this is that the cumulative benefits or disbenefits of not solving this grow as an organisation grows. So an organisation's operating model and solving these three key pillars is very relative to the size of the organisation. It's very easy in a small 2 or 3 man band organisation to work with just good people. As that grows and you introduce more processes, more people with varying levels of competency, maybe different locations, the process part of that becomes more important. So getting standardization and consistency of results and efficiency becomes more important. So even with great people, they might do it in a very inefficient way and there might be a lot of waste work even though the results are great. So processes help with that consistency and efficiency over a larger organization. And as that organization expands even more, systems become more important. So you might have very well documented processes, but people aren't using them well. You might have various people in remote locations doing very different jobs that rely on the consistency and speed of those processes being communicated to them. So having processes built through systems that are interlinked and automated becomes critical for them to link those together and improve kind of efficiency, speed, and also to capture that data as the organization is growing and wants to look at areas of improvement. So the really simple way to think of this hierarchy is that people produce the performance and produce the value. That processes build consistency and efficiency, and that systems connect and inform. And you may be thinking, okay, that's great and informative, and what does that have to do with project management? Well, there's a key reason that I make it one of the 2 founding principles of my book, and that is that people are more important than processes, because this applies, an operating model applies to a project. So it's very common, as most people will see, that the focus is on the methodology used for project management. But a methodology is just a process. It's a series of prescribed steps that we walk through to try and achieve a consistent outcome. And you may be thinking, this is great and informative, what does that have to do with project management? And there's a key reason I make this one of the founding principles of my book, and that is that people are more important than processes. And that is because project management methodologies themselves that most people focus on to deliver a project are processes. They're a series of predefined steps that we walk through to try and get a consistent standard of outcome. But that's the wrong area to focus on first. And ultimately, as a project manager, the right thing to do is to make sure you have a great project team, that you have people working within the project with the right skills, the right behaviors, the right number of people in the right locations, the right motivation, a really clear vision of where they're heading to and using the right tools. If you do that as a project manager, it would be very difficult not to get great results. And while running a project with only great people might get you great results and might be more painful and less efficient than it could be, that's where methodologies come in. They help to break a project down into those controlled stages to make sure that you're doing the same things that you know produce value over time, to ensure that it is as efficient and as stress-free as possible. But the problem with looking at a project management methodology to solve your project delivery is it cannot solve your people problem. You cannot solve a people problem with a process. It can't give people the right skills and behaviours. It can't give them the right motivation. It may be able to provide some useful tools. It can't give them a really clear vision, but it can help to make sure you're going through all the stages to solve those things. But ultimately, you need the people first and then the methodology second. And if you believe, as I do, that people are the most important thing to deliver great results in a project, that has to start with the person who has the most influence in the project manager. You have to have the right skills, the right behaviours, the right tools, the right motivation, the clear vision to deliver a project successfully. So my book aims to address that by introducing those skills and behaviours, by introducing this concept, and it can cascade then down into a project team. And once you have those areas solved, then you can overlay it with a really good methodology, and the two of those combined should get really, really good, efficient, consistent results. And if you think of a project team as a small organisation, a small group of people trying to achieve an outcome similar to how an organisation does on a wider level, the principles still apply. And that is why I firmly believe that people are more important than processes. And if you extend that, the mindset, particularly that of a project manager, is more important than the methodology used to implement the project. And if you like this video and found it informative, you can see the previous videos on my channel in the playlist that I've created, link in the comments below. If you want to buy my book, it's available on Amazon and other areas. Again, link in the pinned comment. If you'd like to contact me directly, my details are there, or leave a comment in the section below and I'll try and reply as quickly as possible. The next video should be out in about 3 weeks, but if you're watching this much later, it might be out already. Until then, keep things really, really simple, use what works and keep it really pragmatic.